You know there's a way for nurses to start a business, but there's so many moving pieces. Cut through the crap. It's time to go right to the source and get real about what's working in business and marketing for nurses with your host, the founder of Nursepreneurs, Catie Harris.
Hi, it's Catie, and this is another episode of the Nursepreneur podcast. And today I have Tammy Hartman, who is a nurse that runs a business called Hartman Holistic Healthcare. And I'm really excited to have you here today, Tammy. Thanks for coming.
Oh, sure. Glad to be here.
So give us a little bit of background about you and how you started out as a nurse and how that led to where you are today.
Well, I actually was going to school in another state for psychology, and I wanted to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Well, then I, met my husband, who's from the hometown area, and he wasn't able to get a job where I had started to apply for grad school. So I had to come back to Ohio. And so for whatever reason, I said, I thought I wanted to be a nurse. So I tried to apply to get into nursing school, and they were full, of course. And I graduated in May and got married in June. Then I applied for nursing school. They were full. So I was getting ready to accept a secretarial position at the counseling center. I'm like, hey, I'll at least get into the counseling center. And the day before I was to accept this position, the nursing school called and said they had an opening. So I thought, well, okay, I guess it's meant for me to be a nurse. So that was in 1988. So I've been a nurse for a while. So the nursing career started out in, most of my years have been kind of balanced between surgery, psych, and home health. I just couldn't get enough of them. And I would work one area and maybe be contingent in another, you know how nurses do. So I just was satisfied to be spread thin. And probably 10 years into my nursing career, I started having back problems, which, that makes sense. We're pushing and pulling patients. And so I would, medicate myself with NSAIDs. And so anyway, that ended up going into more problematic issues and the radiculopathy. And so they did MRIs, and I would have bulging disc problems, and it just was something all the time. And diagnosed with degenerative disc disease, had this radiculopathy, and I was working at the surgery center at the time. So on pain days, I would be the circulator, and then I would just be the last patient, and I started getting epidural steroid injections. And I had probably total of 12 over 3 years. They were short-lived, and, I really didn't like to take a whole bunch of medication. It seemed like I just was doing oral steroids or something all the time, or these injections. And so, you're a nurse and you're a woman, and a mom, and you just keep on pushing through, just keep going. And a couple years later, I went to the dentist for just a regular cleaning. And the next day, I couldn't close my mouth. I had this TMJ lock. I don't know what was going on, but it was a nightmare. And I ended up going to back to the dentist. They're doing a panoramic, and by the time I got there, I was able to close my mouth, but panoramic said, there's nothing wrong, but I was in excruciating pain. So that nightmare went on for 2.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say like 2.5 weeks or something.
No. And what was interesting is I would have these x-rays, and you know, I'm going to all of these specialists and they're like, well, there's nothing wrong. I'm like, look at my face. I had facial drooping, and even my eye doctor, I had macular swelling on the side that the TMJ problem was on. So I was just a mess. I mean, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and you know, I'm pushing through and I feel terrible. And finally, I mean, I was doing home health at the time, and you know, I took a blood pressure on a patient, and when I bent over to take the pressure, I fell to the ground. And I'm like, oh my, I don't know if I was weak, it was just, I felt so bad. And then I'm like, okay, I cannot do this. I am not a safe person. I mean, it could have been terrible. I could have fell on this, you know, poor lady's arm and broke her arm. I'm a big girl. And I luckily that was the last patient. I cried all the way back to the office and I said, I can't work. I've got to get myself fixed here. I am just a mess. Everything hurt. I could not think. It was just a nightmare. So I left my position and I just was on this journey. And I went to, you know, some doctors, but they just kept wanting to give me pills or do physical therapy. Then I would have side effects from these pills, and I just had it. I was a terrible mother and a terrible wife. And so out of desperation, I started looking into alternative therapies and, you know, these holistic practices. And, you know, I did some goofy crap. I didn't really care. But I did some really goofy things. Well, then I found a DO that was like an hour and a half away, and he did absolutely nothing traditional. He was, you know, cash only. And he put his fingers in my mouth and oh my goodness, he moved a muscle or a bone or something in my, it was excruciating, but I had some relief after that. And then he had his own array of homeopathic solutions that he made, and he injected my chakras. I'm like, what the heck are you doing? You know, I didn't know any of this stuff, what was going on. And then he tested my blood, urine, and saliva the very first visit. And so then I went back the following week, and he's like, you're very sick. I'm like, I know. You know, your adrenals are just, my adrenals were shutting down because I was in constant stress with this pain and just, you know. And then, interestingly enough, I had some heavy metal toxicity. And could it be from the contrast dye? Could be. So he ended up doing an IV chelation to help pull the heavy metals. So at least I didn't feel like a mannequin because my muscles were just so hard and rigid. So that was helpful. But then he had a nurse in there that she would do muscle testing, and I was watching her, and it was just like every cell in my body was doing a happy dance watching her do that. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And so she did this modality called Touch for Health, and it uses your own muscles, you know, to assess the flow of meridians. So it's combining some traditional medicine with Chinese medicine, and it is a really cool modality. I'm like, oh, I got to learn that. So the doctor was like, hey, you're a Jedi in training, you know, learning, because all of this is energy. It's stuck energy. And so I started learning that modality and just like working on myself, learning to muscle test myself, find out where, because Chinese medicine says any, A-N-Y, ailment that you have is because of a congested or blocked flow in one of these meridians. So, and there's different reasons, you know, you have it's because of your structure, your nutrition, your emotional, your electrical, and your spiritual. those get stuck in these flow, because emotions, most of our problems are emotions, because emotion is energy in motion. And so the backstory probably with part of my issue is, I was a rough and tumble tomboy. I fell out of trees. I fell off of, I hung upside down on a slide and I fell on my face, and, I had blood everywhere. I was like 5 or something. And my mother had to carry me all the way home. Luckily, I didn't break any teeth, but with all of those traumas, and plus I had perceived some emotional things as a child that really weren't accurate. And, my body just held on to all of that stuff. My cranial bones probably had shifted at the time of the fall. And it took, 40 years later with this dental visit, just having my mouth open just kind of triggered everything. So with the energy medicine, of course, I've learned a lot more since that time. I mean, I feel better at 53 now than I did in my 20s and 30s. And it really is. I tried to go back to traditional nursing, and oh my gosh, I feel like a big old fake. I cannot, I cannot give somebody, 14 medications when they have one bowel movement per week. There were just so many things. I just wasn't, and I felt myself starting to get sick again because I just wasn't living what I was congruent, in believing. And so it just started out like, I'm just going to start seeing people that I hear the hot mess. Oh, I'm a hot mess. I'm like, oh, well, come see me. Let me see. So, I just do this energy balancing on the person, and our bodies are wonderful. They can heal. So if you get these energies, these meridians open and flowing, then the body will naturally heal. So like if acupuncture is pretty mainstream right now. And so the way they open these congested or blocked flows in the meridians is they put needles in place. What I do is use acupressure. I just use my hands, and you just move different points on the body, and it helps open the flows. And there's other ways, to open the meridians. And because I'm only one-on-one, I had taken some time off the past couple of years. My parents are elderly, and did that whole battle with the healthcare system the last year and a half with my father, and he passed away, and I've been grieving. So now I'm back, and I'm like, okay, I want to, so now I've hired you and I'm in your program, and I don't really want to see people one-on-one, because there's only I can only help one I'm saying the same things, it seems like, over and over. And so tapping on these meridian points will help move the stuck energy. It's so flippin' easy. And it's an evidence-based practice now. So for instance, I just have a client recently, she came in, hot mess, and she was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis. And that's the other thing. Words carry energy. I mean, that's in the Bible. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Be careful what you tell a person they have. And so I'm also a gardener. I go find the weeds in a person, and I pull them out by the root. And so anyway, this lady was told that she had pulmonary fibrosis, which, she took it on because her sister is in a debilitated state with that. She has clubbing, fingers, toes. And So my client is like, oh, look, I think this finger and this toe is starting to club, and I've got this tightness of the chest. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So lungs, this is the other interesting thing about emotions. Emotions, I don't know if this is Ayurvedic. Anyway, certain emotions will settle in certain organs. So lungs is grief. And so I put her on the table. We start, moving the energy. And then I ask her, have you had, a loss? Oh my goodness, she just started crying. And she had lost her father within a year. And then her ex-husband had passed away, I think 2 years prior to that. And, she just she hadn't resolved it. And so then further into the balance, we're doing some muscle testing. Well, then it bubbles up because now we're moving energy, and now it's coming up into her awareness, because our subconscious minds are sneaky. They hold all that information. So then she's like, my divorce. And I said, what do you mean? Well, she had this divorce, and see, that is a loss. People do not realize, lungs and these lung problems are grief, but it doesn't always have to be a death. It's a loss. It could be a divorce. It could be your best friend moved to another state. It could be you lost the job that you really, really love. You lost your house to a fire, or you had to move because your spouse or somebody was transferred. It's then if we don't deal with these things, that emotion, that energy gets stuck somewhere. So these unresolved emotions are just trapped energy. So long story short, there only had 3 sessions with her. They get homework. My people are assigned homework. They have to, drink their water, because if we are electrical, and I'd say you would agree we're electrical, what? EKG, EMG, EEG, what are the E's? So what's the best conductor of electricity is water. And we're mostly water. So if you're not even drinking the basic water, your electrical communication is not so good. And so she was good about increasing her water. She was moving the lymph. I just teach her how to, so it's basically acupressure on certain points, but I just make them like they're massaging themselves. And she did the tapping. And she was very good about doing her homework. And she went back to have a scan. I don't know if it was a scan or an x-ray. Anyway, when they looked at it, they scratched their heads and they're like, this looks really good. And then they did a breathing test, and they're scratching their head again, and they're like, you know what? You're not really showing any signs of pulmonary fibrosis. And let's just revisit this 6 months from now. And she feels great. She's sleeping. She tapped on the stress of getting told that she had this problem. She tapped on the stress of, the divorce, and then losing her husband, losing her father, and just tapping on all of those emotions. And it just helps move the energy through, and the body can do what it does, and then that's heal.
Yeah, I mean, well, Tammy, you've brought up so many things here. I have like all these notes numbered now because I want to go back to a couple of things and unpack some stuff that you've said. And one of the first things that you said when we first started this conversation, you were talking about how nurses really spread themselves thin, and there's this kind of premise that if we work harder, I don't know, we have more impact, or whatever. But you found that working harder just made your body just relapse, right? Like, I mean, it's not about working more or working harder that you help more people, but it's actually more of a drain on the body. Is that what you were saying?
Oh yeah, it certainly is. And then I'm one of those special people too that I found out. I'm energy sensitive. So I could walk into a patient's room and I could just feel this heaviness. And I'm still trying to I get it, I am energy sensitive, because I can feel other people's stuff, and there's certain crowds I have to avoid because I'm going to puke, or physiology was ready to happen here. But I think a lot of that too is, that empathy. I really took on patients' stuff, and I didn't really process it or know how. And then I think women, we're nurturers. And then if you're a nurse, on top of that, you're a double nurturer. Like, you just keep going because you've got to care for, these people. And then if you have family, you keep on going. I got to
There's
care.
no end to it.
Yeah, it never stops.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate the energy sensitive, and I never thought of it that way because I'm the same way. Like when I just hired an au pair this past year, and I went on energy levels, and I knew I was doing it. Like, it was the one thing that I was like, I really like that guy's energy. I don't care what his resume says. I want that guy. So I actually got a male au pair, and he's got the softest, nicest energy, and he's worked out fabulously. But it's the same thing when I was working in the hospital. I was like, I really could sense the situation or that person's energy, and it kind of dictated whether I liked taking care of that patient or not. And it's not something that I recognized until fairly recently, that how impactful other people's energy was on me.
Oh, sure, we have to create boundaries or we get sucked in, and then we're not doing anybody any good. If we get drained energetically, who the heck am I helping?
That's so true.
I can't help anybody if I'm drained.
And the one thing that I really appreciated when you were talking about your own medical diagnosis, and it's one of those things again where if you don't fit into a neatly packed medical diagnosis, you kind of the Western medicine, let's say, will look at you like you need a psychiatrist, or there's something wrong with you. You're obviously attention seeking, or something along those lines. And I feel like most people don't neatly fit into that medical diagnosis. So can you talk a little bit about the struggle you had in getting a diagnosis, or how did you finally decide to go into alternative therapies?
Well, I started out with my personal physician, and I said I'm hurting all over, and I don't know if that's when I got the official fibromyalgia during that time seeing him, but maybe I'm blocking some of that. It was not a good happy time. But so he wanted to give me, muscle relaxers, and then I'd have anxiety and depression. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm turning bipolar here. And I told him, I said, if we don't get this under control, I feel like I'm losing my mind. So then he puts me on an antidepressant. And then the side effects of that, I became constipated, and then there's sexual side effects. That's not cool either. That was like my only one good thing that was happening. And so I went to see a neurologist, same kind of thing. He just medication, but it was very frustrating, and I felt hopeless that no one was listening to me. And and I'm a Christian, and I would never take my life. I'm not that brave, but I'll tell you, there were days that I just prayed for the Lord to take me now, because I just was miserable. And I was just a miserable human being to my family and my kids. And so the big joke is I probably gave my kids a journey because I neglected them. I said, but I know how to fix you. So, so, I don't know if I answered your question.
You did, and I mean, it's really, what you're saying is really powerful too. I mean, because you're speaking for a lot of people who are going through similar situations that you are, and they haven't found what you found. So what you offer and what you're doing is absolutely amazing. Now, have you come across people who look at you weird, like energy medicine, like that's
Yes.
kind of goofy thing? And if they don't believe in energy medicine, can you still help them?
Yes. Yeah. And that is my peers, even, there are surgeons and doctors that I just adore. And then they look at me like, you're doing what? And which it hurts me because, I was a rock star surgical nurse, I felt like, so they respected me and I know that. But then when I tell them what I'm doing now, it's what? And I think more and more energy medicine is getting some recognition because there's science behind it. There's research, and will it work for somebody who doesn't believe in it? Well, I think your belief has something to do with it. If you're closed off, you won't receive anything. So you have to get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm open to receive this. I'm ready to dig deep and see what I'm holding on to and release the old traumas, emotional traumas, whether they are real or perceived, because your brain does, at the time you didn't know the difference, and physical traumas, our body holds on to these physical traumas. So if you can release this trapped energy, I'm telling you, it will change your life. It can.
Yeah, and it does make it hard because, ironically, the way that I kind of fell into different energy medicines, and I guess going to the left of Western medicine, was when I started my business. And when I started some of my businesses, I kept hitting these roadblocks where I couldn't make any success. And in business literature, or kind of the marketing realm, they always talk about mindset and your blocks, because it's a common problem. And it always comes back to something that happened in my past. Like, I didn't want success because of this, or, my 9-year-old self was dictating that I'm going to do that. Or so in business, I actually had to go back and resolve like all these personal issues that I had before I could really move forward. And it was the weirdest thing. So by the time, I went back into the hospital for a little bit, I'd become this kind of, I guess, if you'll call, freak of nature, because I was like, oh, like all of a sudden traditional medicine, traditional nursing, like you're saying, giving people 12 medications, or we're doing all this stuff. And I was just like, why are we doing this? Like, I don't understand. Like, this feels so wrong at this, and it was that journey that I had taken, to the left. And then when you try and come back, it's never the same. And, I felt so much more empowered by working on my basic energy fields. And the words, like you say, the words are so powerful. And it's actually something I teach my son now. He'll come home and he'll say, I'm stupid. And I'm like, Matthew, please, you have to be very, very careful what you say. I said, you are what you say you are, and we don't say that. So it's something that's changed my parenting as well.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, going back into the hospital and saying that you believe in acupuncture working, or acupressure, or the Reiki, or all these other things that are out there that are actually more mainstream than other things. Yeah, it gets you the kind of what happened to you?
Yeah. Oh, well, but it is, I mean, I was resistant of it myself, because being in the medical field for so long, and then trying to learn these different modalities, it's like, this is weird, but as I kept learning and seeing, I can go back and think back on some of these patients like, oh, if I could have just done this or that. And, the wild thing is my dad, when he was 80 years old, it was his very first hospitalization. And it was open heart, so he went for the big one. But I remember after his surgery, they're hooked up on all the monitors. And he does not know how to articulate, that he needs pain medication because, he just doesn't know how to articulate that. So his blood pressure was up, his sats were down, and it was a horribly busy time on the floor at that time. They're always short staffed. It just, how floor nurse, all that is. But so anyway, his leg just kept going back and forth. He was just suffering in pain. And I felt helpless. I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Well, I just had started learning, energy medicine. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pull out my little book from my purse that shows all of the meridians. And I traced the meridians is what it's called. So all I did was take my hands and go over his body and run the lines of the meridians. And, I didn't even do it. My intention was to help him. So your intention is important. So I just ran my hands, up and down, following those meridian pathways. And I'm telling you, I shocked myself. Within 3 minutes, all the monitors and everything calibrated and did his pressure came down, his sats went up, and he went to sleep. His leg wasn't thrashing back and forth. Now, that was amazing to me. Just from taking my hands and, going over him energetically, these meridians, it was on the monitor and he fell asleep. So something happened there. So that was when I was like, whoa, this stuff is pretty cool. That is really cool. And then when he had his leg amputated a couple years later, above the knee amputation, and the phantom pain, all that is a disruption of energy flow. So after his surgery, when he got back to the room, I just took my hands and went from the stump area and just ran my hands down along to where his leg would have been, out his foot. I just did that a couple times, like I was stroking his leg. He never had any post-op pain.
Wow,
So,
that's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And it can be so simple, and that's what I love. That's why I it's not that I'm tired of working one-on-one. I feel more passionate about getting this out because it's so simple. It's very empowering to people to know that all they have to do is put their hand on their heart chakra and, spin it around, or, tap on the meridians and move the energy to calm down, to reduce stress. And that's pretty powerful, and it's empowering because, the anxiety problem, my daughter is in her last year of college, and all of these college students that have, these service animals because they have anxiety, that is just becoming ridiculous to me. We need to empower our kids and everybody. Just simple tapping, energy movement can help calm your system, move energy. You can be physically and emotionally well just with your own hands.
Yeah, that's incredible. So how do you see that moving into, one-on-one, like you said, it's great, but it's also very limited. So you need to reach like a larger audience. So is this something you can teach in like a group setting or an online setting?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Very easily.
So I guess, can you give us maybe just an example, maybe of what, maybe just like one thing that people could do that would be beneficial, or maybe help them with anxiety or something?
Well, with anxiety, you can do a couple of things. You can cross your arms and legs, because usually when people get anxious, it's like their energies get scrambled. Energies go all over the place, so they're not able to actually be centered, calm and focused. So simply crossing your legs and crossing your arms forces the energies that are flowing on the right side and on the left side, we're symmetrical, to cross over and integrate, because your left side of your brain operates your right side left, so what it does is it helps integrate brain and body by crossing those energies over, and it can be very calming. And a lot of these things we do naturally. If you've ever been standing in a line waiting for your Chipotle or something, and there's people that stand cross-legged. I mean, our body naturally wants us to keep our energies moving, or they'll cross their arms. It's just a natural, your body's trying to help you out. Just like when you're thirsty, your body's trying to tell you you need to drink. So your body does movements in effort to help you cross your own energies over. And you can tap right on your thymus, tap on the sternum very lightly, because that's your heart chakra. There's a heart chakra there, and then your thymus, and then there's some meridians, so that's very calming. Or just take your whole hand, and then that way you're getting a lot of meridians. Just kind of tapping your chest a little bit. It's helping open the heart chakra, because your heart chakra is the emotional center. And then the K27s are right at the collarbone, which that is the fear. That's your kidney meridian, and it's the fear point. So yeah, you'll get a lot of things if you just kind of tap your chest a little bit.
That's awesome. And you know what's interesting about the crossing is, like, I have a tendency to cross too, and I've tried to break that over the years, because they tell you that's, you're being closed off, or I don't know, you just have to be like your chest open, legs hip width, or but whatever. But it's like, I guess it's been counterproductive in a lot of ways.
Well, it just depends. I mean, if you're in a stressful, situation or something, you just have to, what is going on in the environment at the time, or if you are being closed off, versus if your body's trying to tell you to cross over your energies or protecting yourself.
Right. So Tammy, where can we find out more about you and what you're doing, and any courses that you might be starting, and to learn more about energy?
Well, my website is www.hartmanholistic.com. And of course, it's a little old. There are some services on there, but stay tuned, because Catie's going to help me go grand with some courses or coaching programs or something. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about this. This is right up my alley. Like, I want to take your course, actually.
What could help me develop it?
Everything's inside of you. We're just put it out on your website, so this is going to be great. But thank you so much for doing this today. And again, thank you for what you're doing as well, because this is really, really important, and it's what patients are looking for. I know they're absolutely looking for this, because nobody wants to take 14 pills and all the side effects that come with that. So.